Hi, everyone. Buzz Delano here with Delano News Advance, promoting the smart home profession. And today I've got a couple of guys that I'm sure are going to be interesting, informative, and entertaining to have a conversation about our profession, especially coming from the electrical contractor side and how electrical contractors can, should, and maybe sometimes need to figure out how to work with the smart home and AV guys. So I've got Kyle Figueroa from Figueroa Electric in the Boston area. Kyle's on the road in his vehicle after an interesting day. And I'm here in Whitestone, New York area of Queens, right? Yep. With Michael Stellmann of Stellmann Electrical. Really quick, I just met Michael recently at the CEDIA show and just kind of thought, hey, we got along well and this would be a good conversation to have. And he dialed me into Kyle. So here we are. So thanks, guys. If you could each take a minute or so or whatever you feel like, tell me about yourselves and your business.
Basically, I've been in the electrical field for 27 years. I love the trade. It's awesome. 2010, which is 15 years ago, my first CEDIA I attended. Really didn't get a warm welcome, which is expected. And then realized the animosity towards electricians. But then, over the years of doing AV, I understand where that animosity comes from, because you get that closed-minded electrician that doesn't want to learn the new. I always had a passion for tech, found my way, self-taught, kind of mainly focused on lighting control, Lutron, because, most of it's electric, so it's a good fit, and then we just fill in the gaps with audio and networking and security and things like that.
Yep, good. And Kyle, how about your business?
All right, so I've been in electrical fields for about 20 years now. I started my company about 4 years ago. This is actually starting into my fourth year, and this is my second year being an AV integrator. I always kind of had, same thing like Mike, I always kind of had a thing for tech. I was a big Best Buy guy for a while. I always dabbled in it. And it was definitely on the audio video side, I've always dabbled in it. Then, Mike and I, we met each other on Instagram. And I was actually doing my first homeworks project, but as the electrician for the integrator at the time. And I actually took over the project. And as we were doing the project, and I read all the manuals because I'm a nerd like that. I love to learn. And so I ended up just reading all the manuals, and I figured out, and I basically, this AV integrator came in and he was like, Kyle, he's like, what are you doing being an electrician? He's like, you're an integrator. And I'll never forget when he said that. And it was like my first catch-up project. It was probably about 300 Tetra lamps, and it was all the programming, homeworks panel, things like that. And that was like my first taste of it. And when I started my own company, just like how Mike said, I wasn't exactly well received. I was doing a job for a buddy of mine, and he was like, "Oh, you know anything about Control 4?" And I'm like, "What? No." And so I went on and I applied to become a dealer. And basically the rep in my area basically told me to go home and go play with my blocks. And but he was absolutely right. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and it was humbling. It really was. It was something that, like Mike said, there's a little bit of gatekeeping in it, but I think it's not so much as the gatekeeping part. I think a lot of people have to kind of get rid of that mindset. I think it's more so the fact that if you're here, you need to want to be here, and you need to show them the effort that you're going to put in, because it's not easy. I think a lot of electricians, the problems that they have is that they sell with their own wallet. And, especially in the AV integration world, where you're selling high ticket value items and things like that, or all these design focused things. And that's something that a lot of the electricians, and plus the other thing is too, electricians, it's easy to find a problem. It's either has power or it doesn't. And so you can find that problem versus, an integration on a network side, it could be off by, a matrix number. It can be off by a 1 or a 0 or something like that. And nothing works.
True. Yeah.
Like a subnet mask is bad, or an IP address is bad, or things like that. So
there's so many more things that need to interoperate with, AV. I'm beginning to not call our industry just AV, because obviously it's a lot more than that. Back when it all began, it was audio and video, and it's expanded to control and automation. But I often think of our whole trade, and I guess you could include electronics in the electrical. It's about comfort and entertainment. Comfort is the stuff you've all got to have. That's all become very high tech the last decade or so. And entertainment, you name it, whatever type of system it is. But yeah, it's a lot more complex in our world. Not that there isn't complexity in the electrical, but your number one priority, I imagine, is functionality and safety.
Yes.
Whereas over in the entertainment AV space, it's about making a lot of stuff happen, and the complexity comes from making everything work together. Not too many years ago, we had interoperability issues and a lot of products weren't compatible, and there's a lot of workarounds. I'm hearing less about that today than I did, so I think things are playing better together. But still, it's more complicated than anybody realizes, especially if you come from the outside.
Yes.
That's what I've noticed over the years. Those we've needed, and I'm glad to hear that there's some electrical contractors, they want to get into it and learn the right things. And for years, we've been saying, yeah, we have to get ready for, and we need the dudes, if you will, from IT and networking to come into the space. And most that come in from IT and networking figure it out. But some, they don't realize it's complicated as it turned out to be.
Yes.
So, but here you guys are as, fundamentally electrical contractors, and you're finding a way to figure this industry out.
Yeah.
And yet when I've talked to you, it seems like you have a little bit different approach to the type of products you like to deal with.
Yes. Me personally, I like simple. I don't like too much programming to be involved. I want the homeowner to be able to program themselves. I don't mind setting up the system, get everything working with the Josh AI. Like, I'll set it up, integrate whatever other systems into it I have to. But if they want to make a scene, I don't want to do that. Let them make a scene for themselves, because it's that easy. And I just kind of feel like a crook sometimes. I know it's normal in the AV world to charge for programming, but I feel like, charging every single time they ask for a request. I'd rather say do it yourself, and then you don't have to charge them. And I'm busy doing other things, so I don't really want to have to be stuck there married to the client every time they want to make a change.
Right. Well, let's talk about that for a second. So how are you finding it when you're trying to encourage the clients to be their programmer themselves? Are you finding that's pretty successfully happening, or is it a bit more of a struggle?
Well, with younger clients, it's pretty successfully happening.
Good.
It's basically anyone that's pretty much under 50, I would say, is they well received. I'd be like, okay, I could do this myself. They get it, they actually, it's like a toy. It's a new toy for them. That's how they look at it. I have like some clients that make some crazy scenes, like to torment their spouse or whatever, which I think is funny. Like I hear these stories and I go, I made this thing. When my husband takes out the garbage, the music comes on. I'm like, that's hysterical. Like, I think that's great. That's something I would do, So it's like a toy.
Well, that's pretty good. That's fun. Yeah. Younger generations, they're growing up more used to apps and this technology. It's natural for them to do these things. So once they understand the basics of what they can do, and you guys have put the infrastructure in the property, everything from electrical, from high voltage to low voltage, and all the fixtures and all of the gear, that client should be able to take it from there. And it's probably an interesting sense of personal satisfaction if they can say, okay, they've had professionally installed system for comfort and entertainment, and yet they can do it themselves, which means they can change it as they want to.
Yep.
As long as you probably educate them what not to mess with.
Yeah.
But they're probably pretty good at figuring that out. So that's cool to hear. I've been in this industry, a few decades, and I've seen everything from the beginning of custom installation when, it was a big deal to put speakers in the wall or the ceiling and get them off the floor. And then televisions being hidden in millwork and cabinets, and then control and automation happening to where we are today. So I think if the technology reaches a younger audience, I think that's really powerful for where the future of smart home profession is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's funny because when I first got into it, that's exactly where Mike was at. Mike was like, he's like, oh, I'm just like Josh AI and Lutron, and which for the most part, that's probably the majority of the AV integrators in my area as well. I'm a glutton for punishment. I will take on some stuff. And, I'm a huge Control 4 guy. I love Control 4 for what it is and for what it does and things like that. I like to do a lot of fun, crazy automations. But now I find myself where I am almost kind of going the route of, well, now since Josh AI is now, they're taking on so many new integrations. I think at the time, when Josh first came out with a lot of the stuff that I was doing at the time, Josh didn't natively integrate with them. Like there was no control over it. So I would always have to layer on top of Control 4. And so basically I would do a lot of my certain, basically have it pull in like a macro or something like that and have just Josh trigger it. I'd program an event and, Josh just trigger it through its own codes or whatever. Through whatever triggers I would basically program for it. But now as time is going on, I definitely still do like using Control 4 a lot of the times. That's probably my primary one for controllers. But like I said, Josh AI is quickly becoming the front runner for as well, where I'm kind of you know what, I can probably just do this with Josh. It is a lot easier because exactly you do a lot for your clients. And then also with the way how Josh is set up with the history, you can see what they did. You can kind of look back into it. Troubleshooting wise, it's significantly better than other ones.
That's really efficient because, there'll always be troubleshooting. Things are always going to kind of get a little wonky no matter how well they're installed and what the gear is. So if you got something that's easy to figure out, obviously that's efficient. The last thing you guys want to do is have to roll a truck. And the fewer times you're going to have to take a call of some sort, whether it's a normal business hours or what often happens with the AV trade is off hours, the better. So that's going to lead to client satisfaction. Real quick on Josh AI, I mean, in our space, they came out initially really focused on voice control. So they seem to be in the smart home space, the leader in that. Is that still their focus, or has it expanded to a greater, a wider range of use?
I would say they expanded into being its own sole integration system without needing voice.
Okay.
You don't have to use the voice component if you don't want to, if someone doesn't want to have that feature. So I recently just did an install 2 weeks ago. The guy had an old AMX system.
Oh yeah.
And basically we updated his Lutron illuminations to HomeWorks. He had a driveway sensor, pressure plate. Cars drove in and it would make a sound through the AMX, the speaker. So what I did, so I just incorporated that into Josh, created an announcement with Sonos. Now I just simplified the whole thing. I just threw the Josh core in and I'm done. He has the Josh app. Everything's under one platform, Sonos, and Lutron is under the Josh app. And I mean, the house is under construction, so we'll probably bring more systems in, like the stats and things like that.
Wow.
But it was a simple solution. Like literally, we set it up in the driveway sensor. Once we found the wire, we set it up in, 25 minutes. It was done, programmed, in and out. Where if I had to do that with automation, I'd have to go into the software and build this whole macro. When this happened, but meanwhile, it's just like, oh, when this closes, say this on Sonos, and I'm done. It's
Yeah, super efficient.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So a few minutes ago, kind of at the front of our conversation, we were talking about the AV side of the business versus the electrical side, and where there's profit, where there's stability. Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about and kind of take the direction of how to encourage AV integrators to begin to understand more about the electrical contractor trade and vice versa, and what opportunities may exist. And granted, this could be a polarizing topic, but I think it's important. I see the business around the whole country. There are other electrical contractors that have, over a number of years, have all been dedicated AV businesses that have been successful, but still, for the most part, it's almost two separate trades. So it's interesting that both of you guys arrived at the AV side of it, in a similar fashion, but through a different pathway. But let's talk a little bit about how the trades, why they should work together. Maybe at the same time, what are some of the speed bumps that have to be overcome typically?
I guess I'll start off with the AV integrators and the electrician. If there are two separate animals here as well. There's very few of us that are, a hybrid electrician, where you're doing both AV integration and electrical, right? So the reason why the AV side of things, and around here, we don't see a lot of partnerships between AV integrators and electricians, for the simple fact that the partnerships that we see, the extent of it, where it goes, is that AV integrator will hire an electrician to run all the wiring. That's about the extent of it. Other than that, any electrician that knows, especially on the electrical side of it, this is where it gets all muddied up, is that you have a lot of AV integrators that don't want to create those alignments or those relationships with electricians and say, cut them in on what it is, right? And that's the thing is, it's just the electrical field, same exact thing how Mike was saying, especially for me, when I first got into AV integration, my first CEDIA, I might as well have been a LEPA. If it wasn't for Mike and Fred, I don't think anybody would have ever talked to me, because as soon as they saw electric on my badge, literally, I remember sitting in the Savant booth, and they're like, "Oh yeah, just throw your electrician a case of beer," and that's how they treat you. And we're basically we're just these wire monkeys. We're just hired to just sling cable, and that's basically it. And we're knuckle draggers. We just drag our knuckles everywhere, and all we do is just drill a hole, put a wire through it. That's the extent of it. So the problem is that we understand it and things like that. Not a lot of old timers just don't want to deal with it, because if they're not making money in it, why should you care? That's where a lot of it is. But I think if you create those alignments with the electricians and you educate them and stuff like that, I think it goes a lot further, because that's at least what I like to do. Here, I like to educate a lot of the guys to let them know like what's possible. Like there's sometimes from an AV integration, from a programming perspective, there's something that can get a guy out of a bind. And like they'll loop me in on a project like that. And it's just something that works out great that way. And then everyone's making money. You see what I'm saying? And I think it's that relationship building, you know, versus if they want all the money and stuff like that. And which part of the conversation that we had earlier, you know, which Mike can speak to it too. It's just, unfortunately, if you're a residential electrician, I know like here in Boston, it's, if you're a solo company, you have to look at it as that, are you going to do volume or are you going to profit price? A lot of the guys out here, they're all volume. So they have like these 20, you know, to 50 guy shops, and they're just trying to blow out these jobs. But the thing is that they're only doing just the electrical portion of it. But the thing is that the margins, these guys are working for like 2 to 3% profit margin.
Oh, wow.
Which, like,
I knew it was skinny. I never knew that it would be as skinny as.
That's how bad it's gotten. That's how bad it's gone. And then never mind that you're also competing against guys who are unlicensed, and that, you know, they basically buy a license. They find a retired or a guy in the back nine, you know, a union with a license, and they basically pay him $500 to $1,000 a permit. You know, and this guy just, you know, it's all gravy to him. All he has to do is just sign a piece of paper.
Wow.
You know, these guys that just pimp out their license, and that's just what it is, right? So when I first started my business, I learned that really fast when I did like my first bid against, like, you know, it was like a 1,800 square foot addition, and, you know, they wanted all this different stuff. And I was, you know what, I gave him my best price. I knew my numbers, and I'm like, gave him my best price. All of a sudden, didn't hear back. I reached out to them. He's like, oh yeah, you were like $30,000 more than the guy.
No kidding.
Like, how? And so I'm thinking, like, he did the job for $15K, a $30,000 job, $15K. I'm like, the stock alone's 10.
Wow.
So
yeah.
And you're now thinking, you're like, how? And then time went on, I realized it, and then that's what really pushed me into AV integration. Because then I started talking to Mike, and then I'll let Mike start taking all this, and then, you know, he can start saying, you know, about, you know, the reality is that electricians, for the most part, like I said, getting back to my first CDIA, everything that almost every single manufacturer was saying, and the good news is you don't need an electrician. Or the good news is that it minimizes the electrical interaction. They're just trying to cut us out more and more and more. But I'm looking at it, it's lighting, it's electrical breakers, it's switches, it's all things that we make money on. And then now we're just being cut out of it. And then so at that point, that's when I reached out to Mike, and Mike can probably take it from here as far as like,
there's got to be a way. Well, hopefully some younger generation electricians start, you know, seeing the opportunity in this field, and our AV side of it becomes more receptive on education and things like that. But yeah, everything you've said about some of the perceptions, and a lot of them are misguided. In some cases, they might be accurate about the electrical contractors. But I look at all of that as, and I've always thought this over all the years, even when I was a manufacturer, I was never of the mindset that we have to cut the electricals out. I might not have really understood the full value, without a doubt. I could have been in that camp, but I think it's been a missed opportunity for the two trades to get closer. And now the last few years, maybe lighting is the thing, lighting and shading and things where there's a lot more going on that is not just related to entertainment products. Perhaps that's the tie that kind of binds the two trades together a bit more. Plus, you know, a bit of a generational shift in the AV and entertainment side of the business, as well as the electrical trades, whether you realize the opportunities. There's a need, there's an opportunity for everybody. And of course, for an electrical, if you're operating on really skinny margins, that's how the business works. If you can find yourself getting into the residential integration business, well, in our space, we want to be competitive and fair price to the consumers, to the homeowners, but at the same time, we've been taught, and we teach ourselves, that there's value in what AV integrators do. Don't leave money on the table. Provide great service. Design the right system. Have the right stuff work. Understand how to support the customer, but be profitable so that you can grow. And that's something I think can help your side out.
Yes, definitely. One thing I learned from just being around the AV world and going to CDIA and talking to other business owners is the importance of turning a profit. You know, not selling a job with your, looking at with your wallet, because what you're selling is value, and you may not make. So like Ketra lighting generally is not in our budget, like people that are installing it, like to put in our own house. So you can't look at it like the first time I saw my largest Ketra job, and I'll never forget this, it was a $200,000 job, and I'm not pulling a wire. So from an electrician's mindset, I'm like, this is crazy. the guy's going to think I'm ripping him off. And I send the price and he just writes back, cool, send me a deposit request. And I was just like, holy mackerel, this is nuts. But then afterwards, I'm like, wait a minute, the apartment's 37 million. My 200,000 is nothing. This guy, that's like my $20 is like, that's to this guy. And that really was my eye-opening point to say, you know what? This is what it costs, and that's what it is. And that's it. So you can't bid with your wallet. Even I was guilty of that starting my own. I was bidding pricing like side work when I started, but because I didn't know, I'm like, oh, this guy's gonna think I'm nuts, with this price. But once you understand business, you have overhead, you have expenses, you got to turn a profit, and I'm sure everyone knows that old time contractor that's always in a bad mood. Well, guess what? He's been charging the wrong price for 30 years, and that's why he's in a bad mood.
Yep.
Because it's what's the standard in the industry, in the electrical industry, or plumber, or whatever it is. Because it's always that old contractor that's miserable because he's been killing himself his whole life and not charging the right number.
Yeah.
And that's what's important, like to electricians that don't understand, like you gotta charge,
Yeah, maybe that the guy you described there, theoretically, maybe he realizes it, but it's too late for him to change.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't have the confidence to make the change. And that's what it takes, is confidence to run your business a little bit differently to become more successful, whatever success means. And success, of course, in that, of course, you got to, making a profit and growing your profit so you can enhance your business and reinvest in the business.
Yeah.
Bring some more people on board. And then, of course, everybody gets to enjoy that. So, historically over the years, the AV integration business, most of us are grown, we're homegrown, going back the last few decades when this whole, profession, if you will, started as an offshoot of retail, as became custom installation. And now what I've seen, and I think a lot of my peers in the industry, whether they're manufacturers of product or manufacturers reps or dealers or distributors or any other professional in the trade, they would agree that our trade is beginning to grow from just hobbyists. And while we all started out as hobbyists because we liked audio and video, and we're kind of like hands-on technical geeks, it's now expanding a lot. We see a lot more in relationships with builders, with designers, with architects, the kitchen and bath designer trade, which is a very specific design trade, versus the rest of them seems to be aligning with us. So if we, like, the one remaining trade that really makes a lot of sense for the AV side to work with is the electrical. So hopefully we see some more of that happening. You guys have seen the opportunities.
Yeah, without a doubt, because like another point I want to make too is that, like, for any electrician that is listening to this, and as far as like, you even considering it, right? The biggest issue it is that we find here is that most AV integrators, AV is almost an afterthought a lot of the times, right? AV is like, it comes in at the very end, and by that time the budget's gone, right? And so I think electricians are always part of the conversation in the beginning. So I think with having a background, you're going to have a much more success in designing a project. Now you're increasing your margins tenfold, if not even more. So, I mean, like for me, there's probably more often than not, I almost use my electrical background just to get myself in the house. Then that's where I'll basically sell all my design. I'll sell my speakers. I'll sell my audio video. And it's gotten to a point where, because of electrical being the way that it is and the margins becoming so skinny, I almost much rather say, hey, listen, the electrical is no longer of value to me. Hire your lowball electrician, and I'll do all your parts and smarts, and I'll do all your AV integration.
Right.
But then now we have our license to run all the cabling, because we need to be licensed here in Mass. So like to run all of our cabling and stuff like that. And so like now I'll just move into that. It's only providing more and more value as you being an electrician first, because you're going to hold all the licenses in addition to that, especially if you're doing cameras, especially if you're doing security systems and things like that. And then in addition to, as soon as you start understanding it, now you're almost becoming that AV integrator. Or you be like, hey, listen, I designed a sliding control system. I need you to run all these cables or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or how we can help each other make money,
Yeah. Well, you touched on something that's real important, in any trade. The sooner you can be in on a project, either by necessity or by design, the better. And again, back on the AV side of it, AV smart home side of it, that's something that's being preached for at least the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's also helping to establish relationships with designers and architects to be there at the beginning. It's hard to do for a business that isn't used to it,
Right.
but the sooner that in whatever form of contracting you're in, because, we're contractors in the AV side of it. That's really what we are. The better. The relationships get stronger, the opportunities get better, and of course, the overall design of the system. The earlier they're involved with the design of the infrastructure and that the electricals and everybody else works together, the better end result. And it takes time to get that to happen, but that is key. And I'll also say, I'm going to pinch a phrase from you that I liked a few minutes ago. You said, we supply the parts and smarts. I thought that was a brilliant. We'll have to make a tag out of that and attribute it to you. A real tag that came out of Delano News Advance in the early days of this podcast series. So that was a good parts and smarts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool. So what else comes to mind with relative to all this?
One of the things I would chime in to say is basically if an electrician, if he doesn't want to do the programming and all the intricate stuff, he should at least understand it. Learn what systems need, because you're going to be valuable to integrate a hire to pull. When we work with a few integrators where they hire us because they know we have some knowledge of their industry, where I'm just doing the electric, I'm just pulling the wires. But we know at the rack to hit the floor and leave 20 feet. We know to leave 5 feet of slack at the TV, where I've heard stories of electricians pulling, let the wire hit the floor and cut it at the floor. And then the AV guy got to do the rack and he's screwed. But, just have that basic knowledge, work with an AV guy, and you create a partnership. So then when you're at a job, you don't want to do the programming. You could call up Joe Schmo. Hey, Joe Schmo, I got this AV potential job. And if that integrator is a smart guy, he's going to be like, great, here's 10% of the job, because now you have a working relationship, as a finder's fee or whatever you want to call it. Not a finder's fee, but almost like a sales commission. He sold the job. He brought you in.
Right.
I don't want to say finder's fee. That's an old school term for bad things. It's a commission. The electrician sold the job for you. Now you're in and you work together.
Right.
It's a partnership. I mean, me and Kyle just geek out. We want to do the programming, but not every electrician needs to, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Well, right. Because that's another thing too, is that let's touch upon the fact of that, we're dealers for a lot of these brands. A lot of people don't understand the amount of investment it takes to acquire to become a dealer, right?
Yeah.
People don't realize it. And I spoke about this a lot on my page on Instagram, right? Where, for me, in these past 2 years, my first year, between opening orders, and then trainings, time lost, because obviously you have to fly to these trainings. I probably invested over $100,000 of my own money to acquire lines, speaker lines, control lines, AV lines, all these other different things, right?
Right.
A lot of electricians don't want to make that investment, in which, to piggyback on what Mike was saying, right? What's happening is that a lot of AV integrators in this area, what's the biggest issue that everyone has? It's finding help, right? It's finding people who are qualified, who know how to run the cable, who know how to do this, know how to do that. So for me, same thing like Mike said, is that because we have a background and we understand what the control side of it is, right? AV integrators have reached out to us, be like, hey, can you pre-wire my house for me? Absolutely. We'll run all your wiring, and then they come in, they do all the programming. You see what I'm saying? But now they can keep their overhead small. Now they're strictly programmers. And then they find those guys that where they are only being parts and smarts. They're basically just supplying the product, they're doing all the programming, and they're not slinging a piece of cable. You see what I'm saying? The more you can educate an electrician, the more you can educate somebody in it, the more valuable that person's going to be to you, because they're going to be able to, you know what I'm saying? You're able to take on more jobs because now you have a workforce that you're able to pull from. Now the electricians make more money as well, because now they're just basically slinging more cable. They're able to sell more on that part of it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know too many of the AV integrators that really want to be or enjoy doing the pre-wires. Many of them do, especially when it's a new construction. But I think if a lot of them could offer it to a really reliable group, they would. And then maybe some collaborations would come out of that, because even in this day of everything's wireless for the end user, as you know better than anybody, there's a hell of a lot of wiring in a house.
Yeah.
And
big
even
time.
with, low voltage and, LED light, there's everything at the very least. You've got to distribute power.
Yeah.
Power for your lighting, power for your televisions, power for your wireless access points, which I think remarkably sometimes don't get planned for.
Yeah.
You're dependent on something that's a plug-in, might work, but if that is planned for in the beginning with the tech guys, man, what a difference it makes in terms of how the property performs, especially, a luxury property, and especially a property with lots of users. You got a family. I mean, everybody's got multiple devices going at once. So
Yeah.
access points are really important.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
like one of the things that I do, because I do a lot of luxury development here in Boston, right? And so what it is that we'll do is that we'll pre-wire these houses for network. We'll pre-wire them for like QSX processors in other different areas. Like we'll have extra cabling in areas that we know, hey, this might bring us outside of range. If should they choose to want to, integrate this wing of the house, I already have a wire here that's set up for Lutron, like set up for another processor, or like, a repeater. And then here's my wireless access point, stuff like that. So a lot of the time, since we're doing new development, a lot of developers don't want to put the investment into the product itself. So therefore, we will pre-wire audio, pre-wire video, pre-wire everything else like that. House gets sold, client then wants it. We're already in the house. Well, hey, here's Figueroa Electric. They also ran all the stuff for your network. They could also do all your controls. Now we're already in the house. We know where every single wire is. Job is basically ours. It's already gift wrapped with a bow. And then it's just a matter of whatever system we designed it with in mind. I think that there is a lot of promise in that. And then this is one thing we talk a lot about because we're starting to see a shift. We are starting to see a lot of younger kids or electricians that are now seeing that the writing on the wall that, hey, technology is advancing. All this stuff, everything is becoming connected. Like, I mean, you have your stove, your microwave, your range, everything is connected to the internet somehow, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
more and more what it is that we do as electricians that is now becoming connected. So I think that a lot of them are now starting to realize it, but when they start getting a taste of what the money is and the profit margins that are inside of the AV integration world, they're like, so I'm busting my ass for like 2 to 3% profit margin, and I can be making 40 to 50 points on selling some AV speakers. I love selling speakers. I'll sell speakers all day, making 40, 50 points on it.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. Well, speakers has historically been a good margin point for installers, dealers, and let's hope it stays that way, because we need products that provide good profits so the whole industry goes. We all know that things like televisions, the margins are tighter, but that just brings me back to everything that you guys do as electrical contractors, but even more so in the smart home business for all the fun and entertainment stuff. It's such high value. So I hope that we never see our smart home business become the 2 to 3%, electrical contracting, like we just got to get it done business, because there's so much more value and enjoyment that comes from all the stuff that our trade brings to a homeowner at any given level. Even the homeowner having their first integrated system, all the way working up to estate and luxury type level stuff. It's pretty cool when someone has a home that is automated and has got even something as simple as background distributed music and a couple of connected televisions, some outdoor speakers, and a little bit of lighting control. Man, that's exciting for even an entry level homeowner. And we need to make that happen so the market grows and keep it as a successful, valuable trade.
Yes.
I mean, that's where we're trying to go as an industry. CD's got some initiatives going on. Some other, trade schools have. It's like this profession of, smart home integration is a really valuable trade. We need more people to get into it. Hopefully over time it becomes a national or federalized workforce code for smart home integrators, and maybe someday it reaches the awareness level of electrical. It's probably a ways off, but it's just about as valuable. I mean, we all need power and we all need plumbing, but after that we need smart homes.
Yeah, networks just as important as electrical.
Network is
nowadays.
king. Yeah,
I mean, you could say speakers are a luxury.
Yeah.
Even television. You don't need a television to live, but people need internet. You take someone's smartphone away, it's life changing.
And not just even you and I. Like, oh, my phone's gone or my internet's down. Holy, it's a big, big deal. Years ago, it's a long story for another day. Maybe I'll do a Buzz Shorts on it someday. But I was able to conduct an experiment with my wife and daughter at my home in California. We were living there. And one time, the water had to be turned off. And they didn't notice it. remarkably for like a couple hours. Anyway, so the water comes back on. And I thought it's interesting. So like the next day, I just switched off the Wi-Fi, and it wasn't 20 seconds.
Right.
You know, so what I wrote, I think I wrote an industry article, Wi-Fi or water. Well, the choice is clear.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I took it in the direction of you AV integrators, you need to get onto networking.
Yeah.
You know?
Network's critical. Network, that was like the biggest advice that I got, that
Sure is.
when I got into Control 4, and like one of the first things that everyone ever said to me was that the success of these systems and how much people enjoy them is only as good as the network that's
That's
supporting
true.
it.
Yeah, it's like the
And
weakest
so,
link.
like,
Yep.
if your network, and this is what I say, this is always like my major selling point when it selling to clients, is that I'm like, listen, I'm like, how good your network? And I'm like, because the success of these systems rely heavily
Big
on
time.
your network.
Yeah.
If your network is not up to par, you're gonna hate it. And I'm just letting you know that right now.
Yep.
And then clients always just think that you're trying to upsell them, but by always heading it off at the pass and always kind of just saying it, you let them figure it out for themselves. And then guess what? If you say like, oh, like, you know what, my arrow, whatever, this is what it is, no problem and stuff like that. I have no problems. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, everything is happening, stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, are you ready to listen to me now?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those things. And then like you explain to them like reserve tables and stuff like that. And like, I have this one client, a perfect example. We did a home theater system for him in his house, and Control 4 system. And, you know, it's with James speakers, a 98-inch Sony, and, you know, Anthem receiver, Control 4 doing all the control. And we had shades, and then also some lighting control. And what ended up happening was that the hub that drove the shades, and it was in Kaleidoscape. So Kaleidoscape, you know, has all the triggers with the lighting that pertain to the movie. So like as the credits start coming in, the lights will fade down, the shades draw, and then when the end credits start coming up, the lights fade back up, the shades go up. You know what I'm saying? All these automations start happening, and he loved it. He lost his mind. But we told him, we're like, hey, listen, like your network does not allow for us to set up a reserve table. We have to reserve the hub for your shades. And the way how we explained it to him, and then he was like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, I put it to you like this, the best way I can explain it. It's like basically I'm trying to send you mail, and then you move, and then you don't tell me where you move to.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's the best way for me to put it. I was like, I have to reserve this IP address for that. And so that way the system will always communicate it. This is where you live, and this is how it's all set up. And then so I'm like, so when it drops off, it's because you moved and you didn't tell nobody about it.
Yeah, no forwarding address has been provided.
Yeah, there's no
cut off from reality.
Yeah. So at that point, and like, you know, he's like, hey, this is not working now. I'm like, yes, I know.
I predicted this. We had this conversation.
Yeah.
Now, here's how we solve it today, but it could have been done in the past. But I appreciate it. I was actually going to say, you know, I'm learning. I was going to ask the question, what was the reserve table? But now we know. So it just kind of flowed naturally in your description. That's great.
Yeah.
And
And that's the one thing that we always tell people. And then it's like, you know, like now, hey, well, now we can do it for you for the low price of more.
parts and sparks, the low price of more. Oh, we got to make a shirt or something.
You got to do all these other different things like that. So it's, and next thing is, it's just like they get it towards the end and things like that. And, you know, and it's just one of those things. It's, you know, here's another one for you that I always love to use, is that a lot of these clients, like, they like to jump over dollars to save pennies. That's probably like my biggest thing that I see all the time. And it's just like, it's going to cost you more in the end. If, okay, I understand if you don't want to get into this, let's at least pre-wire for it. Let me just get some wires to these strategic places. And then I know it's going to happen. Then at that point, it's already ready to go. You know what? That's fine. I'll pay a little bit more. Okay, perfect. And then you know it's going to happen. And then they're going to be so happy. And then at that point, trust is 110% at that point. And it just makes the sale going further easier and easier and easier.
The T word is big time. Cool. Well, before we wrap up, and I think it'd be a good idea. Maybe the two of you can come up with a story between the two of you. That's something that happened that's got some humor in it over the years since you met. You can, give it some thought there. Leave some names out maybe to protect the guilty. But there's got to be some good closing story and parting thoughts on all of this.
I was a wild man before. I was a wild man.
I would say I'm always like, I was going to bring up when me, you, and Pete were at the bar at Cedia, because I'm not a drinker. And they were feeding me these old fashions.
Yeah.
and I had
yeah.
to stop.
So Mike likes to get happy feet when he gets a little
I can't-
pickled. He gets a little happy feet when he gets pickled. And so like for me, I was an animal. Like I enjoyed my old fashions. I haven't drank in 3 years. You know, I love to party. I was like, I'm allowed already. And then after a couple of drinks in me, like my Boston accent really comes out really, really heavy. Like I
That's
mean, like
great.
it's like wicked hot. It was if it was like a Ben Affleck movie. It was the first time I met Fred. The best advice Fred ever gave me, because when he was bringing me out the next day, I think I still had some of that old fashions in me. So I have a very loud laugh. I'm very loud, right? And so
Oh, I remember that.
Fred's bringing me around to everybody. And like, he's like, I can hear you laugh from across Cedia. He's like, I'm all the way over there. I can hear you laugh. And he's like, listen, tone it down. He was like, this is not like the bar room, some of that. He's like, these people, he's like, Fred's like, I love your energy. Your energy is probably a lot for a lot of people. And he was like, these people are very laid back. He was like, just dial it back a little bit, dial it back. But then I realized that, you know, when I really started kind of learning, you know, how to sell, like when I really learned how to start selling the value, right? And knowing that you have to kind of meet people where they're at, but also if someone is like, if you're somebody that's very, very high energy, that you kind of, you know, you stay in your room, they stay in their room, and then you kind of try to bring them into like a middle ground,
Right.
Kind of middle ground. Yeah. And so a little bit more of that, but yeah, no, it's me and Mike. It was funny because like it was at my hotel, and our bartender was incredible. That guy, you want to like, I mean, if there's anybody you wanted to learn about value and hospitality, our bartender was so smart. From a sales perspective, this is one thing I learned about while we were there. We were there, and like I said, old fashions were flowing. Bourbons we're just slinging them back. All of a sudden, he's like, "Hey, I got you guys some food." We're like, well, "Who ordered food?" He's like, "I ordered it for you. I want you guys to have a good time." And it was brilliant because what did it cost? It cost him probably nothing. And then now he's going to get a stupid fat tip, which he was already going to get a fat tip. But then in addition to that, he just prolonged us drinking for another couple of hours.
Right.
He knew.
Yeah.
Because he was in on the project at the beginning.
Yeah.
He was aside with you guys. He saw this coming. He had his roadmap all planned.
Planned early.
Yeah, and then like I'm surprised we didn't break tiles, but that was how hard me and Mike was stomping.
That's a really, really good. Thanks, guys, for that. And yeah, I want to mention Freddie McNichol. He's really the reason that the three of us are here together.
Yep.
Freddie, as you guys have known him a long time, I've only known him since shortly before Acedia. A real engaging guy, makes a lot of stuff happen. Kind of, you know, put me and Michael together with some other people at Acedia. Talking to Michael, reached out to you, and here we are. You know, we were hoping Freddie could join us today, but he's got other stuff going on. He's got other projects he's on from the beginning to the end.
Yep.
We'll pull him in sometime because something tells me, since I'm the guy that makes the decisions for Delano News Advance, since it's just me, we're going to do this again sometime in the future, and we'll make sure we get Mr. McNichol in here on it at that time too. So I want to thank you both for informative but really enlightening and entertaining. Great conversation, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was great.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Kyle, Michael, be well, guys. See you later.